Hi, I'm Sean Gibson from Tech Britain. We're here at CultureTECH in Derry today, and I'm very happy to be joined by Ben Hammersley, the ambassador, or Prime Minister's ambassador to Tech City.
Thank you very much.
It's terrific to meet you, Ben.
How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. It's a bit tiring. I'm the ambassador to Tech City in London, and this is Derry in Northern Ireland, and the only way to get here is to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I've just come off stage. I'm a little bit bleary.
Well, it's terrific to see you over here.
It's very good to be here. So today is a particularly special day because of the announcement that I just made on stage, which was the signing of the memorandum of understanding between Tech City and Digital Derry. We've twinned effectively the two cities together, with the idea that the Tech City organisation in London and specifically the City of London Corporation, who have a lot of money, will be helping the Digital Derry organisation, and there'll be and vice versa as well, in fact, to create a sort of symbiotic relationship between the two clusters. So it's extremely exciting. This is the first CultureTECH, and it's very impressive. It's not my first time in the city, but every time I come here, there are more and more startups. I was here a year ago, and there were, I believe, there was something like 50 digital startups, and today there's over 100, and they're aiming for another 100 over the next year. It's super impressive.
In terms of your role as an ambassador to Tech City, what does that involve?
My role is mostly is behind the scenes in terms of talking about both policy and in terms of talking about explaining technology to government, explaining the ramifications of these sorts of technologies. And also, because I spend the vast majority of my life traveling, being on the road and seeing different technology clusters in different parts of the world, whether that's Europe or North America or Asia or whatever, I gather up best practice and I gather up information and contacts and so on, and bring them back to London and bring them back to Downing Street and to UKTI and to the Tech City Investment Organisation, and try and make connections. But my job really is at a very high level, is to help the government understand the needs of the community and the future needs of the community, or the needs of the future community, to be precise. It's very different to many other people who work in Tech City, whose job is all about the current entrepreneurs or the current startups and so on. I'm much more about a 3 or 5 or 10 year horizon, future horizon, but also dealing with other forms of technology policy around things like surveillance and national security and things like that.
Well, just in terms of the UK as a whole then, since you are planning ahead, what is your thoughts for the UK as a whole, as opposed to just London?
Well, as your site and your organisation is very much interested in, I am also very interested in there being clusters all the way up and down the country. Each of those clusters will be different. They'll have their own different cultural input. They'll have their own particular interests. Some of them will be subject specific. Some of them will be technology specific. Some of them will be, language specific or whatever. I would like to see the Tech City philosophies spreading. To me, between you and me and the video, I don't really like the name Tech City, because when it's applied to a single place, so if you apply it to Shoreditch, and the Old Street roundabout, the Silicon roundabout as it used to be called, that single area in London, I think Tech City is slightly cheesy. But if you think of it as not Tech City, but as Tech City, as in an adjective, as in a way of thinking, as a way of doing stuff, then that Tech City thing can spread across the country, and we would be very well served, especially in the non-London bits. In the north, in the places where other industries have fallen away, in places where there is a great deal of talent and a great deal of other culture to feed into it, places like Manchester, where you're based, so that will create, that will take the whole country's economy forward. So I'm very much into that. I think it's very necessary. It's very necessary for social inclusion. It's very necessary for the alleviation of poverty. It's very necessary for the ability for people to flourish. It's a very good thing. And so I would hope that over the next 2, 5, 10 years that the sort of spirit that we see in Tech City, in London, the spirit that we see here in Derry today of entrepreneurialism and of innovation, imagination, creativity, all of that is found everywhere in the UK and is based at, and to a certain extent I would personally like to see a lot more local and community-based startups, a lot more technology that is aimed at the local communities. I would probably be getting into an argument with other members of the Tech City, organisations when I say this, but I'm less interested in somebody becoming the next Facebook as somebody creating services, profitable companies that employ local people to run services for other local people to make the quality of life better in those places. I'm much more interested in that than I am in trying to emulate Silicon Valley or emulate Silicon Alley in New York. I find those things slightly tedious, but I find that local companies in Manchester, in Newcastle, in Bradford, in Southampton, Bristol, doing interesting services for their local communities. I think those are really, really exciting, and they can be profitable. They can help the local economy. They can employ people. They can make a tidy sum for the founders. It's all good, and that to me is much more interesting, and perhaps the future of the tech industry in the UK, much more interesting than riding another internet bubble and creating the next, Facebook thing.
I mean, it's certainly terrific for us to hear. That's what we'd like to see happen as well. So glad that we share that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what we've another thing that we're looking towards is a series of interconnected clusters across the UK, forming a larger cluster. So that's
well. Of course, clusters are always going to interconnect, but you have to look into the thing I like about clustering, and it's not, of course, technology clusters are just one form of cluster, and clusters have been happening for thousands of years, and really since the earliest of cities. You have in medieval cities or existing towns that were medieval cities. You can see things which was the lace makers cluster and the sock making cluster and the butchers cluster and the vegetable, and they're all the same thing. In Nottingham there's a lace makers cluster. In Leicester, where I grew up, there's a whole area of town which is about socks and so on. Clusters are naturally occurring things. Of course, there will be, with the internet, with the very fundamental nature of digital technologies, you're going to get those individual city clusters talking to each other. That's going to happen very naturally. I guess that for me, the next stage after that is once you have a successful set of communities of developers and technologists all the way around the country, is to have them not so much talking to each other, but is talking to the next cluster along. My big frustration, I think, at the moment with London Tech City is that it borders massively multicultural and massively interesting areas of East London, which are all about the garment industry. They're all about their connections with Bangladesh and India and Pakistan, or there are areas that Tech City borders which are all about light manufacturing or something like that. And I would like to see not so much connections between the coders in Shoreditch and the coders in Salford, but I would like to see connections between the coders in Shoreditch and the sock makers in Bethnal Green, or something equivalent like that. But it's not, government or public bodies can't force people to talk to each other. Yeah. But I would like to see in a few years' time that that the great success story, and it doesn't have to be in London, I think that I would like to see in the next few years, the great success story is that the tech cluster in Bradford suddenly goes and connects with the communities in Bradford, which are also, which also share an Indian or Pakistani heritage, and have connections to those countries, and are able to create a whole new set of interconnections and a whole new set of businesses based on the tech, yes, but also the other stuff that they have in those cities. That to me is super important, much more important, in fact, than encouraging yet another social media startup.
Yeah. And in terms of how the UK shapes up against Europe, for instance, the rest of Europe, and where do you feel that we're at, and how do you feel we're doing?
I think we're doing extremely well against Europe, and though I would hesitate to say against Europe, we're not really competing with them so much as just trying to find our niche. Yeah. We have the great advantage. London specifically has this advantage, but many other parts of the UK do as well, in that we are so multicultural and so multilingual and so connected with the rest of the world in ways that, say, Spain or Italy or even France or Germany aren't. Like I say, I would like to see the clusters in, London or Leicester and Bradford and Hull and Sheffield and so on, dealing a lot more with the Indian subcontinent. I would like all of those different things, and we can do that, whereas other countries in Europe can't. So I think we have a great advantage in terms of our place in the world, but we also have a great advantage in terms of the other culture that we have. And when I talked about this on stage just now, that all cultural activity, all cultural engineering, all making of stuff is made up of your own personal brilliance and genius and new ideas and so on, but that is fed upon all of the other culture that surrounds you. And in the UK, we are very, very lucky, incredibly privileged to be surrounded by lots of cultures, not just quotes our own, not just some weird 1950s, white Enid Blyton thing, but the full-on 2012 Great Britain of today, which is massively multicultural, massively multi-ethnic, and all of these people are equally as British, and that massively multicultural, multi-ethnic Britishness is a huge competitive advantage. It's a massive competitive advantage because it creates a place which is really awesome. And from that comes other awesome stuff. Nobody grows up aspiring to go and live in, Marseille or Frankfurt or Dusseldorf or, Valencia. But people around the world dream of living in London or moving to the UK because of its brilliantly rich culture that is made by all of this immigration over the past 600 or 700 years. And so I think we have a huge competitive advantage. If we can back that with the right sort of planning, the right sort of philosophy, with the right sort of financial aid in the cases where it's necessary, with the right sort of deregulation where it's necessary, and the right sort of regulation when it's necessary, then we can come up with something which will be genuinely world-beating. And I think, to be frank, I think that we are not as ambitious as we need to be, because given the richness of the culture, given the richness of our education system, given the richness of the intellect of the island, all of that, we should be making Silicon Valley look rubbish.
So in terms of plans for the future, Ben?
Yeah, plans for the future, there's free pizza and beer in about an hour. And then there's a zombie film festival later on, about 8 o'clock. And then I think the Rocky Horror Show's on. So I'm good. I don't know about, what are you doing?
I think I'll see you there. Sounds great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today, Ben. And it is inspiring to hear, what you're up to, the work you're doing. And I really hope that we can all help to become a part of that and make it happen. So
I think I'm basically doing nothing. I'm just giving some ideas. The real work is being done by people like yourselves and the people out there in the clusters who are starting the businesses and all of that. So I take negative credit for anything. Just everybody keep on doing what they're doing, and look for the opportunities in their local areas, and just go for it. Now is the time. This is the opportunity.
Well, just please keep feeding the information back to Downing Street. And if anybody else in other clusters want to get in touch with you, and
I'm very easily Googleable. I'm Ben at benhammersley.com. I'm at Ben Hammersley on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Basically, you can find me. And if you're capable of sending me a message, you'll work out how. And I would love to hear from anybody. If anybody has any ideas, anybody needs any contacts, anybody wants to be put in touch with somebody else, if anybody wants to buy me a beer, all of those things are cool.
Or pizza. Fantastic.
Or pizza, yeah.
Thanks very much, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.